to meet everybody. As Alex said, my name is Owen Tallmadge. I work for City of Durango Parks and Rec, and I'm the Natural Resource Manager. So my department oversees the open space and trails and Lake Niagara's. And so one of the aspects of the job, managing the lands and the open spaces, is the wildfire mitigation portion of it. And the city's partners in the Watershed Wildfire Partnership Fund, and I'm on the board for about a year now, and it's been a really great experience. So anyways, first time to one of these meetings. So again, thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm going to share with you a little bit about our wildfire mitigation plan for the city open space for the next 3-4 years, 2026 to 2029. And those dates coincide with our prospective grant application with the Colorado State Forest Service. It has a 3-year funding period from the award, which will be in 2026. Quick orientation and an overview of the city open spaces. So these are city-owned and managed lands open to the public and recreation. Up by Animas Mountain, we have Dalla Mountain Park. And then a lot of people are familiar with the Oxbow Park and Preserve out there on the Animas River. Kind of going clockwise here. We have what we kind of refer to as the College Mesa open space. It's a collection of a lot of smaller different parcels and open spaces that run along the ridge line there, from Chapman Hill up to the Lion's Den and then down around to the nature trail. And then of course there's Horse Gulch, which is it is our biggest open space. And it's now becoming bigger and bigger with the coming online of Durango Mesa Park. Then we've got the dog park down by Smelter Mountain, over in Mountain Park there, over by Crestview neighborhood and Parents Peak. And then heading west out of town is the Twin Buttes subdivision and open space. I'm sorry, go back to that last slide. Sorry, I forgot that. So collectively, we have about 3,700 acres that we manage. There's about 110 miles of trail that are open to the public on those lands. And annually, we get about 500,000 trips out into those open spaces. So they are very, very heavily used, very well loved, and a lot of people out there. So it's a huge resource for the community and visitors alike. All right, so the little gold swishes on this aren't, the actual shape. It's just more to give you an idea of where we're planning to work as a visual aid there. So collectively, these are 58 acres of treatment areas. We plan to start in June of 2026 and wrap up sometime in November of 2029. That way we have time to get our invoicing in and get our paperwork wrapped up. And as I said, it's a Colorado State Forest Service grant that we're hoping to help fund this under 50-50 cost share. A total cost of $291,000, which equals out to be about $5,000 a treatment acre. And I'll get into the actual treatment a little farther on here. I'll explain a little bit about how we prioritized our different project areas for this phase. This isn't a one and done. This is it. This is just this chunk of time and this chunk of money that what we can get done with it. So one of the things that the grant asked us to prioritize as a municipality was water storage. And so I've got on the map here a bunch of blue dots that show the water storage tanks around town that are, used for domestic water distribution and fire hydrants as well. So we tried to find areas where we could do work in the open spaces on the forests where it would also potentially protect those water tanks from being compromised. Or some of those are booster stations, right? They pump the water up to the tank. And, if one of those was to go offline during a big fire, that would be a big problem because then the fire hydrants wouldn't work and no one would have water, which you kind of need. So big priority there. Some of the other factors were to protect the open spaces, right? Like the land itself has a real intrinsic value to preserve it and not just let it get torched. So we tried to find areas where, by doing these treatments, we would help protect the open space itself, which in turn helps protect that recreational asset and that recreation opportunity for people, which in turn helps protect the economy of our city and our county, because that's a really big part of it is the recreation. You know, people come here for that. They spend a lot of money, which goes into the sales tax and the joint sales tax, which funds a lot of what goes on, boots on the ground in the city and the county. You know, obviously a factor was the wildland urban interface and fire risk. So we looked for those areas, and I'll show you a little more of that here. We looked for opportunities, again, as part of the recommendation of the grant for cross-boundary work. And so I've got on here, you know, but these obviously aren't the parcel lines, but it shows you that there's Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Bureau of Land Management land, adjacent to a lot of these open space areas. And some of those have broader treatments and historic treatments and future planned treatments that these will in some ways tie into, which is always great to work it on that landscape scale, as well as a few smaller private efforts around. We also looked at accessibility, right? It doesn't do a whole lot of good to treat 100 acres somewhere that you can't get to. You know, you have to build a road to get machines there, or hike firefighters in with, you know, it's not productive, it's not efficient. So we looked for places where there was already vehicular or mechanical access, or it was close enough that hiking in wasn't a limiting factor. And that really goes into visibility too. Again, if we spend all this funds and do all this work out somewhere that nobody sees it, well, it doesn't really, you know, catch anybody's eye, and it doesn't really gain a lot of interest. So we look for places that, you know, were along trails, or even in people's backyards. So they hear the chainsaws going, they hear the chippers, they see the work, they know that there's an effort going on, which helps, you know, bring more funding in, more interest, and just encourages people to do more work on their own. All right, so I put in a few things here that just are kind of interesting to consider. So the Colorado State Forest Service has a wildfire risk viewer, which is a GIS application that you can overlay these different you know, databases that they have. And again, as part of the application, they asked us to look at some of these and describe how our work, you know, tied into their priorities. And one of those was the fire intensity scale, which you know, is developed with a probably LiDAR or something, which is a vegetation types and fuel loading and the slope. You know, the more fuels and more vegetation in an area of a certain kind of vegetation, and then the steeper the slope, the more intense a fire is, and therefore you're going to get the higher intensity, the red. So you know, this is just an interesting image to see just how much of our community really is in that moderate to high intensity fires. Another one is the wildland urban interface risk, which is a measure of the potential impact on people and their homes from wildfire. Now this is an interesting bit here. I don't know, you know, if this is like outdated or if it's how they really assess this, but I've got these purple circles on here. You know, Twin Buttes, there's nothing there, right? But there's like 180 homes and more every day, but they don't have any indication of it being a wildfire risk yet. I think we all can probably assume it's probably pretty high. So again, I thought that was a little bit of a mystery. And over there by Oberon too, where we're doing some work, we know that there's quite a few homes that have developed up in that area, yet they're not showing it at all. But then on the other side over between Horse Gulch there along the Sky Ridge development, you know, we're doing a big treatment that really overlays with that wildland urban interface risk. So, you know, feel like we're getting some good benefit from that. And one of the biggest efforts the Colorado State Forest Service is doing is this 2020 Forest Action Plan, which I'll just read this. the Colorado State Forest Service prioritizes areas where goals from the forest conditions, living with wildfire, and watershed protection themes can be achieved on the same management footprint by a single project or activity. So they're really looking at it holistically. So, forest health, wildfire mitigation, community safety, and watershed health. If you're doing something in these areas that are the darker colors, it's really showing a greater benefit to the whole landscape, the whole community. So this is a nice image to show that, the spots we're hitting are definitely in those higher to highest priorities for their forest action plan. So here I'll describe a little bit about what our treatment process is going to look like. You start on the left up here with thinning and pile building. So that's obviously just the first line effort of going in, cutting out vegetation, and managing the slash. So what we pull out, the slash management, we're proposing either to process via chipping in areas where we can either get a chipper into the treatment unit or get the slash out of the treatment unit to a chipper. And then in areas where it's just not accessible or not practical to do that, we're going to build piles and burn them in partnership with Durango Fire Protection. And we may see some of that depending on, as soon as we get snow, they're ready to roll and burn a few piles from past treatments out in Twin Buttes. So exciting and really nice to see that. Then another component that we're working on is native seeding in the treatment areas. And that really is sort of dependent on the season and then the time of the disturbance. So some areas we will plan to seed it before we go in there. Other times we'll go in afterwards or before burning or after burning. Really, what we don't want is to seed at the wrong time where the grass germinates and then it freezes and dies, or it germinates and gets trampled. So again, it's a little bit of a game. You have to play with the weather and the disturbance and the timing. But the idea is that, right, you go in, you pull out all these fuels, open up the canopy, there's a lot more sunlight, stuff's going to grow. And so we're trying to encourage nice, healthy native grasses and forbs to grow. That provides a base for wildlife to come in. They help nibble the oak back, create a little more natural system, and also it offers a little competition to the oak and the other shrubs, again, to try to help suppress that growth and encourage a little more open park-like areas that are lower intensity fuel types. So the next step is going to be to monitor the treatment areas, and we don't have a real scientific monitoring plan, with plots and measuring the different types of biomass that's coming back. It's really just going out and looking and just being like, okay, this is okay for this year, or oh wow, this one's already growing back. We better start planning for retreatment. So that's the kind of the next one. It's just sort of just continually assessing these areas, keeping an eye on them, and then trying to plan ahead so we can get out there and retreat. And usually that's just coming in and doing a little more maintenance work, or if it's really thick, a full other thinning to go in there and just pull out more mass and more mass until we get it at a good balance. So I put two other things on here just for context. On this side, when you're getting ready to do the thinning, the chipping, the seeding, it's really heavy in the procurement, right? So getting the contracts written, getting the scope of work, getting a contractor hired is sometimes a really big lift. And so that's something, for anybody else who's planning on doing projects, don't forget that that's a lot of work, is just getting somebody hired. Because there's, limited contractors out there and the summer goes quick and they're busy. So definitely plan ahead on that. And then certainly on the public land side, and, we have to do a lot of documentation on the backside to make sure we're tracking how we're spending the funds and what we're actually getting accomplished. So just another part of the process. I'll get a little bit into our treatment prescription for these areas. So based off of a lot of the resources that the Colorado State Forest Service puts out there, the fuels break really is what we are after, which is, you can see on these visuals, that says road, but you could assume trail as well, right? So we have these opportunities where there's already a little bit of a corridor built into the topography of the hillside. We're gonna build off of that and create a fuels break, which is a wide corridor up to 300 feet wide, where the vegetation is thinned out. And just a little nuance between a fire break and a fuels break in terminology. The fire break is like a full-on, there's no fuels, it's bare soil. It's what you do when there's a fire like raging up the hill. You go in there and you create a fire break. A fuels break is a preventative measure ahead of time, which gives an opportunity for those fire crews to either create a fire break when they need one, or the fire loses its intensity, and it creates these opportunities to help manage that fire and reduce the chance of a catastrophic large-scale wildfire. So that's really the goal of the fuel break. And that takes the shape of clumping if you're in the oak and shrub, pinyon, juniper type vegetation, and or selective thinning and removal of ladder fuels if you're more in the ponderosa type of vegetation. And then this, just one more kind of nuance to it, which is what, again, we will probably be looking a lot more at, is what they call, or some people call, the shaded fuel break, which, isn't just, again, like a clear cut through the area. You're trying to selectively maintain that vegetation in much more of a more, historic type of structure, if there were wildfires in the system. So, real diverse age and size of trees, and really clumped up bushes that are spread far enough apart, they're less chance of the fire jumping between them. So that's what we're looking for. And that also provides just a much nicer aesthetic, because again, these lands are recreated in, and they're not just there. We're not just trying to bulldoze to make sure they don't catch on fire. We still have to maintain them in a way that people enjoy them and the wildlife likes it. So, great. Thank you all very much, and happy to answer any questions that come up. Yeah.
I love the idea that you're gonna be doing some seeding. And so it sounds like it's mainly forks, and are you gonna do any other interesting stuff like ponderosa pine or any other maybe shrubby stuff, or it's all just herbaceous?
Yeah, mostly grasses, and then a few flowers mixed in there. I think, I'm not sure how well the seeding for stuff like ponderosa works, just broadcast seeding, because that's really the treatment is they go out there with a bag and they check it out, right? And so,
Yeah, I got
you have to assume that there's probably quite a bit of that just doesn't germinate or gets eaten by birds and whatnot. And so we've talked with, the reclamation companies, the seed companies, suppliers themselves, and the State Forest Service has some recommendations on which types of species actually do well in those. And so we've kind of got a tailored mix based on that, and then also on the different locations, what's already growing and thriving there. So yeah, it's mostly grasses and flowers.
Have you entertained the idea about establishing a volunteer corps?
No, but I'd be happy
I'll
to
be
hear
honest
more.
with
Yeah.
you, being from Durango, I would never trust trying to hire somebody because you can't. That's the cold hard truth about Durango. It sucks. I can't stand that you can't hire anybody for anything. But there are very good people around here that would love to help out. I would be one of them. And I know there's a lot of legality involved in, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. But I think if you have people with enough credentials that are willing to volunteer their time, you'll get for a lot less than your $285,000. And I don't know, it's just a thought. I'm a retired fireman, but I'm from Chicago, so I'm not a wildland guy. But knowing firemen, they will love to volunteer in things, and there'd probably be a lot of people that really know a lot more than the average bear, you know what I mean? So, but it's a thought. I couldn't help but think that you're taking on a grand thing. It's really, I like the idea,
Yeah.
but you started off saying, like, logistics of
Yeah,
hiring somebody,
no, and
I
that's,
tried to
that's
get a
a,
well guy, who
yeah,
did it myself.
that's a really interesting idea. And then you're right. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who would love to do
Right,
work like that and help out. And, you know, we have a partnership set up with the Durango Fire Department to do this type of work. And this is just another example of the complications. Is last summer, we had planned something about 22 acres of treatments that they were gonna do. And it's great for them because it's a revenue source, right? They're always trying to find money to pay the staff. And so they work for us basically at cost, so we get a bargain, they get out there, they get their exercise and PT and everything and get training, but then last summer, you know, fires break out all over the place, and so they're gone, and they couldn't commit to any of our work. Whereas the summer before, you know, there was no fires around and they were sitting around twiddling their thumbs, and then we didn't have the projects lined up, and so, yeah, it's really just trying to get everything to line up at the right moment, so, yeah, volunteers might be a nice
just
way to
throwing it
bridge
out,
the gap.
I guess I can't help but think that it may help the cause. And then one other question, I'm sorry, folks. What is this Mesa Park?
Oh, sure.
Is that the new road that's going up there?
Yeah, yeah, just
I'm
south of
just
town on
wondering, what the
Highway
heck are
3.
they building here?
Yeah, so it's essentially, it's a phased project. The first phase is gonna be a bike park. So, you know, much focused on like downhill riding, so trails with features on them and big berm turns. The second phase is gonna be I think they're gonna move the whole BMX track up there, as well as a couple other like more park amenities. So you could potentially like sort of spend the day up there doing different things. And then the third phase involves, I think, more like vendors, concert venues, and even a campground. So they've got some pretty grand plans for that area.
I heard it was a fairground.
And the fairgrounds, I'm not sure on that. It may move up there, maybe not, but yeah, they may move the equestrian center up there, yeah.
I was gonna mention with the volunteering, there's a pretty good sized youth corps that comes in the summer. The government funded one, they kind of set up at the old fort.
Yes, the Southwest Colorado
That might
Conservation
be-
Corps,
you have
yeah.
to Apply to get their help, but I mean, they're young people ready to,
Yeah, and that's great,
Yeah,
and we have partnered with them in the
You-
past, yep,
okay.
and we plan to do it again this coming summer. And I'll say, you know, in case anybody happens to work with them, something we learned with that is, depending on the crew, you really have to pick the project. Last summer we had a project that was pretty tough. And we got one of like the middle school crews who were like, it's their first time doing it, man, they just, within like 3 hours, they were done. They had 8 more days to spend out there, so we,
yeah.
yeah, I had to move them out, but then we got an adult crew that was
Yeah.
like, they all had their like red card chainsaw certifications, and man, they just blazed through this other
Wow.
project, so yeah, they
That's
can be
good
a
to know.
really fantastic resource, yeah.
Because we're looking at using them in our area, so
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that about them.
Yeah, I would really recommend talking to their, you know, whoever does the logistics of organizing it, making sure you really understand
Good advice.
their
Okay.
background, yeah.
Their age.
There's also a resource. I was chatting with someone a few days ago. I believe it's called the Harvey House, but I'm not positive. And it's either incarcerated individuals or folks that are serving like probationary things for misdemeanors around that they're required to do community service. And they can count these types of hours and things. And there's we just kind of had a conversation about the idea of using those types of folks for community work. And that's cool because they kind of have their own liability thing that you're already covered. So they're just kind of the manpower. You don't have to sign anything, but I'm trying to think of what that would be, but it's an interesting thought for other folks that are trying to do work in their HOAs or things like that.
Owen, I wonder where you've got federal ownership adjacent to some of those treatment areas, you might be able to work out something on stewardship, you know, maybe even with funding or whatever. So, you know, Forest Service, BLM, they do that stuff a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah, maybe there's opportunity there.
Thanks for the presentation, Owen. I have a question, but I also wanted to mention, it's pretty cool, like on the Twin Buttes treatments that you guys have done in the past and will be burning more of this year Twin Buttes completed a bit of a pretty good chunk of drainage that's like right adjacent to some of that, treatment, like the lower end of the water tower, which is always cool to see when things kind of cross boundaries like that. But my question was about Three Springs. Am I correct about, or could you explain, like, is there city involvement there? I've done site assessments out there with folks who talk about some open space. I don't know what the ownership technically is in between some of the townhomes. And it sounds like there's some type of schedule of maintenance on that, but do you have any information on?
Yeah, so Three Springs is a bit unique in that, they're in city limits, so they're annexed, so it is part of the city. But they have a pretty strong metro district out there. And so all that land within the neighborhoods, that's not, somebody's yard, is owned by the metro district, other than the streets themselves. And then that area back behind there where like the spur line trails go up to the water tank and the BLM, that's all owned by the growth fund, which is part of the Southern Ute Tribe. And eventually they're gonna donate a big chunk to the city. But it's gonna be developed as like a recreational feature, so there won't be really any, wildland, risk up there. But it does bring up an interesting point as well about, we have that huge water tank that feeds the hospital, which is a really important one. But we don't own the land underneath it, which could potentially, have a fire go through and compromise the water tank. So, it would be great to figure out ways that we could use, our potential funding or grant funding to work off of city lands. I'm not sure if that's happened yet, but, yeah, as far as I know, most of that's Metro District and or growth fund.
Okay.
So I know the work around the city, probably like 5 or 6 years ago, it really got going, correct? I think that was about the timeline. So I'm just wondering how these planned next 3 years builds on that, or is it already back to retreatment? Are you guys working on the same areas, or is it all expanding what has already been done?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Some of it is retreatment already,
With
just,
the oak, right?
yeah, managing the oak brush. Some of it's building off of areas that were previously treated. And, up to this point, a lot of it's been very scattershot, just trying to get work done, really high priority areas. A lot of the work got funded through BLM and Colorado State Forest Service grants. And what we're trying to do now through the help of the Wildfire Protection Fund is Jesse Ramirez with Ramirez Natural Resources is putting together this really comprehensive forest management plan for all of the city and county lands around the Durango area. And in that, he has these very, tailored prescriptions for work we can do in these different forest areas and units and slopes and vegetation types. And so from that, we'll be able to pull out a much more strategic way to go about doing these projects and prioritizing them and knowing what kind of treatments we can plan for and budget for. So that's kind of how it's all going to fit into the bigger picture moving forward.
Just a thought, and not trying to complicate things, but, I've done site visits for some folks that are right underneath that historical work that the city has done under like the power line,
Mm-hmm.
right? And some of those folks were even like O'Brien patio homes, kind of like that area where it links up over there. And I think some of those folks, many of those folks were super happy with that work and were hoping that it would go even further. Do you think there would ever be any type of possibility to, some of the stuff is difficult with land ownership and whatnot, but offer some way to have landowners buy in to increase that area? Could that, I know obviously, again, logistically,
Yeah.
a lot of hoops, but.
Yeah, no, that would be great, right? Is like, to be able to offer that almost like a cost share ourselves and feed it through. And yeah, I think it would really just be an administrative process and, we'd probably need to put something together to get city council to approve it just for the use of funds. But it makes sense when you zoom out just a little bit. It's like, yeah, that money's going to protect the city resource, a public resource. It's not just going to benefit that property owner, right? Their treatment benefits everybody else and the safety of the community, so.
Yeah. Or
I
even,
think
you
it's a
know,
great
like
thing, yeah,
contractors just like mobilizing.
right, yeah, that's a
Like
good
cutting off
point.
that cost, you pay, if you want this done, we're gonna be here.
Yeah,
It's a little bit cheaper maybe because they're already mobilized. Is there a way to increase? Because a lot
yeah,
of those
I
folks,
mean, we could do something as easy as, yeah, send out mailers ahead of time, or, you know, I know there's been some effort in the past in the utility bills, they have a little insert. And yeah, something like that, we could say, hey, here's the contractor who's working in this area, call them if you wanna get some work done.
right, yeah,
Yeah, that we wouldn't need any kind of approvals for it.
right, yeah.
That's great, yeah.
We can definitely help with that, like patio homes, we have an ambassador there, they would really help with some of that outreach if you ever think about that, but. So do most of these projects, these are all by local contractors, or do you have staff on hand that do any of this?
Yeah, we do not. Yeah,
Okay.
we do not have, I mean, we've done some, but, they're pulled in so many different directions and they don't really, have the capacity to take that on. So, yeah, the idea is to work with Durango Fire, the Conservation Corps, and if we're lucky enough to get some private contractors to do the work.
Any questions online, Kaylee?
Nothing that I see, feel free to either raise your hand or put anything in the chat. Nothing that I see right now.
Okay,
Well,
well,
if any other questions come up or anything, you can get my contact in through Alex and.
thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you.